The idea of strategic selling is we're going to do all of those things and we're going to create positive bias for us in the best interest of the customer. But then the tyranny of urgency, every organization's going quarter by quarter or month by month, and the urgent is the strategic, and let's just close things. And they've just got these massive pipeline gaps. And marketing never creates enough inbound top of funnel for the sales organization. Sales organization are pretty ineffective in creating good strategic opportunities, and there's just this gap which creates all this pressure.
Welcome back to the B2B Playbook, where we believe that great go-to-market is built on people, not platforms. Few thinkers have shaped modern B2B sales more than Tony J Hughes. Through RSVP selling, combo prospecting, and tech-powered sales, Tony gave sellers and leaders around the world a clear operating rhythm, one built on integrity, intent, and execution excellence. For more than 3 decades, his frameworks have helped organizations turn complexity into structure and sales into real activity outcomes. He's trained and inspired tens of thousands of sales professionals from global enterprises to high-growth startups, and continues to push the boundaries of what professional selling looks like in the era of AI. So today, we are very, very grateful to be joined by Tony J Hughes, who is not just a thought leader, but is the best-selling author, a keynote speaker, and the CEO of Sales IQ Global. And of course, we have Adem Manderovic with us today as well, co-founder of CRO School and creator of Closed Circuit Selling. Today, we're going to explore how selling is shifting towards a more connected system, one that helps leaders replace more scattered activity, driving more alignment across organizations, and replacing data overload with a much more human focus. Tony, thank you so much for joining us. We are very excited to have you here today.
George, thank you. And I always feel after an introduction like that, it tends to go downhill, but thank you very much for those kind words.
I love it. Adem, thank you so much for joining us as always.
I was going to say, at least, Tony, you don't have to put up with my 60 daily page reviews of tech-powered sales anymore.
No, it's good, mate. I really appreciate the support of both of you guys with my previous work. And we obviously saw each other a few weeks ago at the book launch for my first fiction book, Sentient, Meet Your Maker, at the Salesforce Tower in Sydney, which was a really fun event. It was really good seeing you there.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, lovely to catch up there. And that's something that I would like to actually ask you about later on in the conversation too, Tony. So keep that one in mind, keep that posted. Tony, I want to start off by asking, when you look back at your journey from combo prospecting to tech-powered sales, what's the biggest gap that you saw between what the strategy leaders really built and then what actually happened in the field, if there was any sort of difference there?
Yeah, George, the thing that you and Adam obviously both know is that marketing tends to be quite disciplined in how it operates, and it's seeking to create inbound, or it's seeking to identify where there is intent to then, in the world of business to business selling, create what most people would call MQL, so marketing qualified leads that a seller will hopefully accept and then progress through to close. And there's always tended to be quite a disconnect between marketing and sales. Often in an organization, marketing will be seen to be hitting its metrics, and yet the organization is missing its numbers, its revenue numbers. And often the sellers complain about the quality of alleged leads that are coming through, and marketing's frustrated that the sellers aren't following up on those leads fast enough. So we know in the world of B2C selling, and it's also true in B2B selling, but we know that the speed at which we respond to interest has a massive impact on whether we win. And obviously we're wanting to find people in a buying window, because at least in theory that would make selling as efficient as possible. But here's where I really see the disconnect. Inbound leads, or leads based on intent, are often a red ocean shark feeding frenzy of competition. And if you're late to the process in B2B selling, someone else has set the agenda. So often win rates are low, the levels of discounting are high, and it's really not ideal. So from a seller's point of view, right, so for the sales organization, the way that most leaders would define strategic selling is around, we're going to target effectively where there's strongest product market fit and where there's the highest probability of us winning. And then we need to engage early, at senior levels where we help co-create the business case for investing in change, and we help the customer secure consensus with their leadership team for change. We help them identify and manage their risks. And in doing all of this, we create an unfair advantage. It was actually General Schwarzkopf, I think, in Gulf War One, that said to all of his American troops, actually it was a coalition of troops with other countries as well, the UK, Australia, and others. But he said to all of his troops just before they initiated the battle, if you ever find yourself in a fair fight, you had the wrong strategy. The idea of strategic selling is we're going to do all of those things and we're going to create positive bias for us in the best interest of the customer. So I find that the selling organization is thinking that they want to do that and try and plan around that, but then the tyranny of urgency, every organization's going quarter by quarter or month by month, and the urgent is the strategic, and let's just close things. And they've just got these massive pipeline gaps. And marketing never creates enough inbound top of funnel for the sales organization. Sales organization are pretty ineffective in creating good strategic opportunities, and there's just this gap which creates all this pressure.
Do you feel, Tony, that's largely codependent on, you and I have had discussions about this before, and we even did at the Revenue Enablement Society quickly.
Yeah.
That gap is largely due to the explosion of methodologies that qualify after the fact. No one actually talks about what happens before. So obviously, everyone except George here is old enough to remember what we did prior to 2008 was sales's full role was to validate the market. What I was always taught was you needed to find out if they're category defined for what you can sell to them.
Yeah.
And then how you would do that is ask them questions around who they're with right now, what they like, what they don't, earn the right to ask more questions, ask questions like, and if you were going to look at grass as greener opportunities, when would you like to do that, etc. That earns the right to have that conversation. You're building a front loading of rapport, but that also gives you, you're defining your market, you're validating your market, and you can give that to marketing to create something to get you to the table, which closes the gap on timing.
Yes.
But that's not what we see anymore. Do you think, I'm pretty loud on it, what do you think that is largely due to the explosion of those other methodologies that kind of talk about what happens after and they forget about what happens before?
Yeah, Adam, that's certainly a really good point. And maybe even outside of different methodologies, we can talk about methodologies, but especially in the world of technology sales, but generally across the board, including industrial sales, service-based selling, what larger organizations have sought to do is to industrialize the sales process, and they've sought to segment functions. So obviously we know there's hopefully clear delineation between marketing and selling, but they should work in unison. They usually don't. But even within the sales organization, the concept of typically sales development reps that are responding to any inbound intent or interest and trying to qualify, then hand off to a seller. You've got BDRs, business development reps, that are typically doing outbound. And then you've got account executives, the actual sellers. They always have their own gap and they should be doing their own prospecting as well. But everybody should be thinking about ideal customer profile. And I know, Adam, you're very big on this, right? So we should be focusing on where there's strongest product market fit, which means therefore we're likely to get the strongest yield for investing in marketing and sales activities. And people pay lip service to the concept of an ideal customer profile, an ICP. And the thing that we do at Sales IQ Global is we get people to think about the fact that there's firmographics, so attributes of organizations, so industries and geographies are probably the main things about that, and then the size of organizations. Then there's psychographics, and typically for almost everybody, we're looking for companies that are trying to grow. So they've got this acquisition, innovation, growth mindset, because that's the most likely type of organization that would invest in change. If they're just in crisis mode, they're typically focused on cost cutting. And then the third element is really technographics, which includes competitors. So if we know that a growing organization that's got an inadequate technology or product or service or solution from a competitor that we've got a proven path in being able to replace, then they're typically a good prospect, right? So if we target them, the propensity for the customer to buy is much higher. So Reps are meant to do territory planning and then account planning and really think about product market fit. And under all of this, then the buyer personas they're going to engage with. But what I find is just a very big disconnect between the intent of the sales organization and then the level of execution.
I love what you've just said there. And that's why, obviously, through all of these roles, I've built this process, which eventually became closed circuit selling. But that's not what we see at market anymore.
Yeah.
Like, literally, I get put in lunatic groups for saying exactly what you've said, just less eloquently. Like, we should be looking for those things to find out where the biggest range of success is to win.
Yes.
And then once we know that information, we should be giving that to marketing. So in my early days, that was like a manila folder, and we'd put timing on the inseam. We'd take it over and say, okay, could you guys build us this? They've told us this and this. We think we can get here within 3, 6, 9 months. And ones that were outside of that, we would say, okay, we'd give that to product because that might be 12 to 24 months. And then we have all that information, what you just way more eloquently put than what I can do. That's like what the structure of the role was. But do you think are we close to the market understanding or having enough awareness that sales development needs to go back to market development to solve that problem? And in doing so, we make sales and marketing aligned, but we also make them more commercially viable without rubbing the market up the wrong way, all in one.
Yeah, I think the role of sales and marketing is very different. So marketing is meant to provide brand air cover for the sales organization, try and do all they can to create market awareness, definitely use tech tools to try and identify buying intent, right? So they want to run attraction selling or attraction marketing campaigns. So for any of the marketers that are watching this, one of the most important questions to ask yourself is, what do people look for online before they'd ever know to look for us specifically, right? And then we obviously create a lot of good content around that. So we're trying to find people that are trying to solve a problem rather than look for a particular solution or vendor. And then obviously if we can identify that there's intent behind any level of mere interest, then we'd want to hand off to a seller. But the role of the seller, to me, with marketing's air cover, maybe the Air Force, sellers are really the ground force, right? So they're in the trenches, hand-to-hand combat against competition, but their job is to find a way to break into the C-suite of potential customers. So for both marketing and sales, this thing of effective targeting around ICP and then truly understanding buyer personas, and then building what we describe at Sales IQ as a value narrative, a conversation narrative that provides value to the other person, where whether the customer or prospective customer became a client or not, there's still value for them in the conversation. So closing that whole circuit between sales and marketing and customer to adopt a truly customer-centric way of selling is really important. And sales methodology and sales process are two different things, but obviously, sales process should be aligned with buyer process. We should be thinking about buyer journey. But then we need a methodology for assessing specific risks within deals.
Tony, I love that. I just wanted to jump in on the marketing point as the marketer in the room. I think there are so many great points around there about what the role of marketing is to really provide that air cover, to attract people to the brand, to make sure you're remembered at the right time for the right reasons. In my experience from a lot of what we've seen is marketing wants to do that, but is very often reduced to more of a lead generation function because we are tasked on MQLs, which tends to push us towards activities that are so focused around capturing contact details for the sake of it, which doesn't matter how good your intentions are. We end up going back to what we're KPI'd on. And so then we end up using a lot of our time, energy, and budget on doing that. And I wonder, Tony, if that is a great contributor to this big sales and marketing divide, because despite us producing all these MQLs and marketing being tasked with trying to find buyer intent, maybe we're not that great at it because there is such a big sales and marketing divide still.
So, George, I think marketing's suffered in at the executive C-suite level of the organizations that they're obviously part of, with being either seen as or truly guilty of focusing on a whole lot of vanity metrics and fluff. So like how many times has our brand been cited or mentioned, or publishing case studies or mentions in the press. And it's not that those things aren't important, but the CEO is thinking, how does your marketing spend and your marketing activity translate to revenue? So then obviously what that's resulted in is people think marketing should be generating leads. I've even seen organizations where they have passed over the inside sales function to marketing, actually taken it away from sales. So there's field sales, and then inside sales is part of the marketing team, just to try and close that loop with a sense of accountability and alignment. So leaders think about alignment and then attribution. So how do we attribute this marketing spend, this marketing campaign to actual revenue? I'm not sure whether that answers the question, but that's why I think there's this focus on MQLs. Yet all of those other strategic things are really important. So for the sellers to be successful, they need marketing to provide them with killer, high quality, highly relevant case studies. So success stories of existing clients, but case studies and success stories that talk about problems that were solved and results that were achieved, not products or services that were deployed. Now, I know that's difficult because often our end customers don't want to talk about their own dysfunction before they met us as a vendor, solution provider, partner, and then the positive results they had. And then the frustration for marketing is sales go, where are all these things? And yet it's really sales that have got those cold-face relationships that can actually provide those assets. So marketing assets, things like battle cards, things like case studies, references, killer slide decks. Often the inmates are running the asylum in how the brand is represented as we go to market. But closing the loop with all of those things. I'm actually board chair of a company called Live Prezzo, and what they do is they automate the presentation of data to customers or prospective customers. And they're basically using templates, but pulling real-time data out of the back-end systems in the organization so that there's brand consistency in a way that you give sellers back their time. So if marketing's doing those things, and then marketing can not just attribute their activities to MQLs that then convert to revenue, but maybe marketing can then link and get attributed to win rates on deals, for example, right? Because if those things are done well, win rate should definitely go up.
But Tony, the easiest way to solve that chasm would be for us simply to go back as like market validation of cataloged account as the measure, because then you would see sales stimulating the market, handing that through templated data to marketing. And from those, you'll see which ones of those become live active deals from the information that you've stirred up from the market, whether that's 3, 6, 9 months now, or whether that's 12, 24 months later. You'll have a direct line from sales, market, collection, marketing working on the collection of that data to build something to get to a presentation day or a live quoting day or a demo day if you were talking US SaaS. That would be much easier to measure, and we wouldn't need to worry about these mass MQLs and worry about like straight line attribution or wobbly line attribution, because it would be simplified and unified across the funnel. Like we could even then give that information ahead of time to customer success and say, here's the circuit of what's going to happen, here's where to expect it, here's what they expect, here's where we're working on it, here's what they've said. But that's not what we see.
Yeah, and Adam, that activity from marketing would be basically also putting organizations that aren't in a buying window yet into lead nurturing market development cycles. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's been my whole point from 2019, where people have been stabbing me, telling me that's impossible to, 1, acquire the information, and 2, to actually facilitate. But wouldn't it, from George's perspective, make marketing's role a hell of a lot easier if he knows what's coming, what he's got to do, when he's got to produce it?
Yes, but there's a massive strategy execution gap within sales organization. Look, in my view, the weak link in the revenue chain in the go-to-market model of most B2B sellers is not actually product market fit. It's not crazy competition. It's not economic uncertainty. It's not even the quality of the reps. It's the frontline sales leadership, right? Frontline sales leadership is the weak link in the revenue chain. And frontline sales leaders need to be laser focused on geo-vertical segmentation all around ICP, right? So they're targeting well, and then working with marketing, working very closely with marketing on buyer personas. Often buyer persona documentation created by marketing doesn't fully meet the needs of sales, right? So we've got a template for buyer persona that works for sales, so that the seller truly understands who they're engaging with, in the same way that marketing needs to understand the seller that they're seeking to drive engagement with. So there's places where sales and marketing can obviously work well together, but what I find is sellers are rarely disciplined, data-driven, competent orchestrators of a stack of tools, right? It's really marketing that can do that well. So I just think if marketing and sales are aligned, right, we've been really honest, we've looked in the mirror very honestly, and we've been very candid about product market fit, and then we've gone deep on ideal customer profile definition, and then we're using tools, and typically marketing is much better at using these tool sets than sales, but we're then going to use tools to develop lists of target accounts. And yes, what we want, Adam, is we want sellers to try and break into those accounts to the different buyer personas for an initial blended qualification discovery process, where we uncover an existing opportunity to run a sales campaign and the loop back into marketing, so that we never lose sight of that organization, because at some stage there will definitely be the opportunity for us to get in there. And what we don't want to do is just be engaging in opportunities when the customer's already in a process where the agenda was heavily influenced or set by our competition.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I called it closed circuit selling.
But here's the thing, what happens in organizations is all of this finger pointing, right? Marketing are generating leads that sales reject, right? They go, well, there might be some interest here, but there's no real intent. We're not really going to be able to sell right now. And then you've got sellers being very reactive because they've got a blowtorch on them. Their manager's got a flamethrower blowtorch in one hand and a forecast in the other hand, saying this is the most important quarter of the company's history. So anything that's a 15-month long opportunity or 9-month opportunity, that they struggle to drive engagement.
Do you think that is tied to, one, the leader not being in the seat long enough to let it play out and know how to battle their strategic counsel? And two, the systems behind that enablement are not there.
It's a blend of those two things, and then I would add a third thing. I just think there is insane levels of short-termism and pressure and stress on everybody. The immediate has become the strategic. It's all about what can we do to hit the number now. And most organizations just do not have enough pipeline coverage, and what that does is it forces them to do unnatural acts in trying to drag business forward, to try and provide external incentives or pressure points on customers to act before they're ready. And it ends up damaging them in the marketplace. On the marketing side, there's a huge focus on AI and automation, and organizations are just burning through lists very quickly and getting their own domain blocked and their brand damaged in the marketplace. So in the world of musicians, they think about this concept of less is more. Less people playing or singing at the same time. Just take the busyness out, so that the things that you really want to be heard actually get some cut through. And that's certainly true with sales and marketing. So these fundamental things of what's the truth about our product market fit, what really defines an ideal customer, let's build a list based on that, and then recognize we need to do a quality job where sales and marketing are working in unison.
I think there was a report, it might have been from the B2B Institute somewhat recently, that showed the shockingly low overlap in targeting between sales and marketing over accounts, like the overlap across so many organizations in terms of who are we working together to target right now was really, really, really low, which suggests that sales and marketing must be barely communicating, right? I mean, if we're not even targeting the same accounts, like, what are we doing? And does that then suggest that, because I think you said often, like, once you do that ICP work, marketing is probably best equipped to pull all the technical stuff, so sales have a list to work off. Does that mean that maybe marketing aren't doing that often enough and sales are going off on their own and making their own list, because there's just no real overlap between what the two teams are doing?
George, that's so true. And a common thing I see in organizations is marketing to hit their own KPIs and metrics, loading messaging into their Gatling gun of automation, and they're blasting all of these accounts, including existing customers. And a seller will phone a prospect or email the prospect, and the prospect arcs up because they're being, in their mind, bombarded by this vendor with spam. Like the initial thing is, take me off your list, unenroll me out of your campaign. And a lot of sellers in their CRM, in their own CRM system internally, will spend a lot of time marking the CRM for a particular contact, like they do not send any automated emails, right? Like they've opted out. And it's because they're just not communicating, right? Whereas if we think about ICP and then build really good lists, and then we think about, okay, so let's get a strategy for targeting these accounts. Which buyer personas is the senior account executive going to approach? Which more junior level buyer personas will the inside sales rep approach? What do we want marketing to do for us in terms of air cover, right? Whereas in a lot of other types of selling, for those that are watching this, if you're in lower value, shorter sales cycle, higher volume selling, obviously you're wanting marketing, yes, just to find you people that fit the profile and are in some kind of buying window, so we can spring from the bushes and just try and do a one-touch close sales motion, if in fact that's the case. So what I've been talking about previously is more relevant for enterprise selling. But yeah, that's the way that I typically see it happening.
So does that mean, Tony, that the answer would be, sorry, George, that air cover from marketing doesn't happen until sales go back to being stimulating and validating the market first, and then they work off of that information before they do that air cover?
Adam, yes, I think we actually agree, but I'm going to give a different perspective. I think there absolutely is a definite role for a marketing-led go-to-market strategy. Like there absolutely is. And then other times, like, so I'll give you an example. If you were selling a highly complex multi-million-dollar enterprise sort of software services solution into the financial services sector, and you looked at your ICP and said it's tier 1 and tier 2 banks, right? If you did that, whatever the number is, you come up and say, wow, there's actually only 17 prospects for us in, for example, the Australian market, right? If there's just 17 organizations, right, if that's all there is, and there's 9 buyer personas, right, that we are relevant to in these campaigns, you go 17 times 9, like that's not a lot of contacts, and we get one shot at the top, right? We want to really think about what's the conversation narrative, the value narrative that a senior AE is going to carry into these buyer personas. And yes, you definitely want a sales-led approach, and then we're thinking from a marketing point of view, what's the closed circuit support that we need from marketing to support this, in essence, sales-driven motion? Now, that's very different to we sell something to retail shop owners, and there's hundreds of thousands of them in the marketplace. And we've looked at ICP, like we've done all of that, looked at ICP, but there's thousands and thousands of these. And the average transaction size is relatively small, right? We need to sell profitably. And you go, we're going to adopt a marketing-led approach. Think about what do people look for before they'd ever know that they need to look for us, right? So I'm going to run an attraction marketing campaign. I'm going to run an outbound marketing campaign that creates inbound touch of assets. Then we get sales involved. I actually don't think it's a one-size-fits-all, but I think the universal truth that you talk about so well, Adam, right, of the circuit needs to get closed between sales and marketing and customer. Absolutely.
Yeah. What we've found is with that exact methodology and what we teach, that obviously replaces some of what the Big Four tries to do.
Yeah.
And then downstream to about high middle market, it makes complete sense. A little bit lower than that, founders that want to learn these systems are going to run that in unison from a marketing-led approach because they want to learn how to do better, touch better. But yeah, unequivocally correct. Completely aligned.
It's very interesting. As the person who's primarily a marketer in the room really trying to define like what our role should be. And I think we're in agreement, Tony, as to what marketing's role is. And I think maybe there's also like a blend between that marketing-led and sales-led approach, in that if marketing is attracting people to us and we're looking for signals of, okay, who are we starting to engage with us more? If we pass that on to sales, if sales approach that account and have the ability to, okay, first of all, look to see, is there an opportunity now? And if not, can we see, will there be one in the future? Get all that information down and see if we can circle back at the correct time. Then I feel like if sales was able to take that approach, then there would be less and less pressure on marketing to pretend that we have the crystal ball to see exactly who is in market. Don't know what your thoughts are there, Tony.
I agree with that. Sales and marketing need to collaborate far more effectively together and really think about their go-to-market strategy and be really flexible. But this thing of accountability, so alignment and attribution, who's really responsible for what? So these organizations that actually move the inside sales team into the marketing department, because the inside sales team was really working with MQLs, is what was really going on. Anytime a marketing event was run, like attending an industry conference or running a webinar, for example, and people register to attend, or they visit the booth, or they were at the event, right? So just because someone attended an event and you had a display booth in the foyer of where the event was being run, doesn't mean someone's a prospect, but at least there's a contextualized reason to contact somebody. So if you've got sellers following up on marketing activity, it makes sense for marketing to own it, right? But what these organizations have typically done is redefined an MQL that then goes to sales so that it's much stronger, right? So there's an accountability for more discovery and qualification before there's a handoff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, George, you'll agree that all comes back to, no matter where that qualification of cataloging the market or market validation exists, whether that's outbound cold, enabling you to speak to a wider portion of the market, so you're not torching for the now, you're actually just qualifying and building rapport, or whether that lives from those activities, as Tony said, that qualification is still the best method to ensure that you can speak to a wider portion of the market. You're not just torching those people with a blowtorch, because what, unfortunately, the downstream repercussion of those methodologies, obviously people misconstruing what Aaron Ross wrote in the book Predictable Revenue, and then the explosion of the other methodologies, is that's built, even Aaron said on the podcast the other week, George, as you remember, that's built like this pressure anxiety, where they think everything is now or not now. So that's all there is. They can't talk to a wider portion of the market, and people aren't trained to do that anymore. So people literally have called me crazy, going, hang on, just speak to a wider portion of the market, ask them questions, build a relationship, and then when you've got something that's right, go back to them on their buying timeline. Like, it's not rocket science, but yeah, that, I think that the unequivocal truth of that universal truth is that qualification needs to exist as a tool, whether that from marketing-led unbelievable amounts of targeting, or whether that's done up front to stimulate the market and handed back to marketing to be able to build us out what we need. Market's not there yet, though.
Can I just jump in on this with something that, for those that are watching, really important to think about? The mindset of most marketing and selling organizations, so if you think about the sell side versus the buy side of a transaction that eventually happens, from our side doing the selling and marketing, we tend to think about, we're trying to find someone who's got a capability gap that we can fill, or a level of dissatisfaction with their current provider. So I don't know whether you two guys agree with that, but they're typically the two things that we're trying to look for, right? Are they unhappy with the incumbent, or is there a gap with their own tool set or stack, right, that we could come in and fill? Now, the reality is that approach typically just generates objections. So if we spring from the bushes, like a lion ambushing a gazelle, when we phone a prospect that wasn't expecting a call, and we say, I'm from XYZ company, and we have these capabilities, we offer this thing or this service, we'll typically get, don't have a budget for that, not looking at doing anything in that area at the moment, we already have a provider for that, right? So straight away, we're on the back foot. So what we need to lead with, the thing we teach about narrative, this concept of a value narrative, is unless there's a gap in results unless there's a gap in performance and results for the customer against their peers, unless there's a gap, there's no opportunity. So we should be leading not with do you have a capability gap, but do you have a results gap? So if, for example, I'll just pick something. If I was selling marketing automation software, right? If I'm selling marketing automation software, if I say we're the intergalactic market leader in providing marketing automation, a platform or a service, they'd say, we already have one of those. Maybe we have 3 of those, and we have an agency, so no thanks. But if we said, hey, Mary, I actually work with chief marketing officers, CMOs in online retail here in Sydney, and I noticed, so that we play back something we've noticed about their business, their industry, or with the launch of the new product that they just launched, I think there could be a way for you to drive down cost of acquisition and at the same time increase repeat purchasing. Do you mind if I ask, what's your current strategy around moving the needle on those 2 metrics? Now, if the person says, look, hang on, I don't know you well enough to share that inside information, how in the world do you think we could reduce cost of acquisition and at the same time drive up repeat purchasing? We say, sure, it's around a strategy of more precise targeting with a stronger buying intent and with improved engagement. This is how we've seen other CMOs in our industry reduce cost of acquisition by up to 30%. Maybe even more importantly, they've been able to increase repeat purchasing by 50%. How do you think you benchmark against your peers on those 2 metrics right now? Now, I'm not saying that's the perfect way to run the conversation, but what I just did is I tried to build a conversation around, in essence, the business case for investing in change. Not around, does your current platform do this or do that? Right? We've got even better capabilities. Like, people are drowning in capabilities and software products that they barely use. But the only reason that the company will invest in change, because changing anything is time, effort, cost, stress, risk. Like, why would a junior or middle manager in an organization want to take on all of the cost and stress and risk of replatforming something in their business when if it doesn't go well, they'll get blamed? Right? So we need to talk to the leader in the business that all they care about is the results. How do I improve results and do it in a way that best manages my risks? Because they're the conversations that we need to build. So for both sellers and marketers, if that's really the focus, I think that's how we create opportunities that actually can be progressed through to close instead of a level of interest that just then stalls.
What I love about that, and I'm sure George is all over it, is the only difference we ask in the qualifying questions of the catalogue is leaning into even suggesting we know that you've got a supplier in place. But Tony, would it be okay if I just asked you some questions about it so I can be better for next time?
Yeah. So people are certainly keen to help if they see a level of humility there. The other side of that coin, however, is that everybody is increasingly just being spammed to death and bombarded, and it's getting worse and worse with automation and AI. And people don't want to educate a seller, right? So they're just thinking, why are you relevant to me? People aren't lonely and bored looking for another friend in their life from the land of sales, right? They're just busy and stressed. So if we open with a contextualized point of view on how we suspect they would be able to drive improved results, and then the next thing we talk about under that is the strategy that achieves the result rather than our product or solution, that's what I see is the best way to create the conversations.
So it's making it all about them then, and it's the commercial insight that you need to take into that conversation to bring value straight away. Is that right, Tony? And I think that's part of your RSVP framework.
Look, the RSVP framework is just a framework for managing deal risk, right? Like, it's an acronym for managing deal risk. And in very simple terms, what that's all about is the 4 reasons we'll typically lose a deal is we don't have the right relationships, that's the R. We don't have a winning strategy, the S. We don't have a winning strategy for managing the politics in those relationships and competition. The V is there's not a strong enough business case, value creation. Most sellers and marketers think about value proposition, but customers care about what's the strength of the business case. Like, what's the impact and how quickly does this pay for itself? And is it impacting metrics that matter? And the P in RSVP is just process alignment. So RSVP is not a selling process. It's just an acronym where we can think about where is my risk. It's the same as BANT. And for anybody that uses BANT, if you're in low value transactional selling, B being budget is okay. But for anybody in more complex selling, forget B for budget, turn the B into business case. Because the way we need to feel is it does not matter whether you have a budget or not. What we do pays for itself. Let's work together and we'll build you the business case to secure you the funding and resources internally to do this successfully. At the end of the day, we need to sell the business case. The customer needs to have a very serious reason to invest in change before they start getting into why would we pick you over somebody else. Because the more they investigate things, the more typically they become aware of the risks in change, and there are always risks in change. And let me just give you another practical example of this, right? So I just published my latest book here, Sentient, and imagine you watching this. Imagine you work for a PR agency where your ICP is authors, right? So we're trying to find authors that have just published books and we can be a PR agent for them. Anyone who rings me up and says, hey, Tony, I'm from the ABC PR agency, straight away you're going to get objections, right? I'm going to say, I don't have a budget for a PR agent. I'm not looking for a PR agency. I've already got a good brand. I've already got 500,000 followers in social. I'm not looking to build my brand. Just create objections. But imagine if someone rang and said, hey, Tony, love Sentient, absolutely love Sentient, especially the concept that AI could come to believe in God, right? They just find something in the book that they can just show that they've read it, right? Hey, Tony, love the latest book. I think there could be a way for you to generate $500,000 in speaking revenue in the next 18 months at events where they treat you like a rock star. Do you mind if I ask how much of your revenue in the last year has been from speaking events that you just love being at? Now, they're selling the same thing, but one approach is going to get absolutely drive engagement, and the other approach is just going to create an objection.
I love that example, Tony. I wonder, how do modern sellers manage to lead with that much value and sort of commercial intelligence when there's so much pressure on them to do so many activities and call so many people? How do they balance that?
Sellers and marketers need, so maybe this is the key takeaway from having to listen to this whole conversation, right? So sellers and marketers need to lead with the impact their product or service delivers for the client, not lead with the product itself. So for example, if I was selling marketing automation and my ICP is online retail and my buyer persona is the chief marketing officer, I think, okay, what are the pressures in online retail? And the pressures are with AdWords and the cost of acquisition, like it's hard to make a single purchase customer ever profitable. We've got to get repeat purchasing happening and the cost of acquisition is too high. The margins are too low. There's this race to the bottom. So you think that's the problem in that industry. How is a CMO measured in that industry? They're measured typically on cost of acquisition and repeat purchasing, or average shopping cart size, maybe on abandon rates in the buying process on the website, maybe. So there's 4 metrics I just mentioned. So for the seller or marketer, you think, which of those metrics do we move the needle on? And if the truth is our service or solution can reduce cost of acquisition and increase repeat purchasing, then that's what you make the conversation about. Not, we've got the market leading marketing automation platform for online retail. They say, we already have a marketing automation platform for online retail. Why do you think yours is better? What do you charge? Now we're in this race to the bottom, commoditized feature function price comparison that just ends in tears. Like, it's idiotic selling, right? So what we want to do is find out, is there a performance gap for this person in role, and does bridging the gap monetize strongly for the organization? And if the answer is yes, we go, great. What's preventing them from bridging that gap at the moment, right? And if the current product or service or solution they're using is incapable of bridging the gap, and we go, great. Now there's a compelling commercial reason to act. And I'm going to engage based on building the business case with them and help them get all the key stakeholders over the line for consensus for this decision. And again, the marketing team can provide a lot of assets to really help with this. But what we're selling the impact, the commercial impact of what our product delivers, rather than the difference of our product against competition. And most sellers don't even realize that they're taking a product-led approach to selling, right? When they should be taking a business results improvement approach to how they go and sell. And that's why ICP and then buyer personas, and then nail the narrative around the commercial value of change, then find a way to add a personalization or contextualization element to your outreach. And all of this is true of marketing as well as sales. And then segment and decide, is this going to be more of a marketing-led engagement or a sales-led engagement? And what does the buyer's process look like? And then how do we align really well? Because once the customer's decided that the pain, the cost, the risk, the effort of change is worth it if it can be done successfully, then they care about great. So how can this new provider of this service, this new partner, how can they best manage my risks in getting this done? And I think marketing can provide a lot of great stuff there.
I like how that really ties back to really where you opened with, Tony, around, tightly defining your ICP, tightly defining your personas, because that allows you to lead with relevance and bring good value, commercial context to every conversation you're having without having to do this enormous amount of work for every single account, right? Because you're tackling it in a much more strategic way that's a lot more efficient and effective.
Yeah. Said.
Before we move to, because I want to get onto your book, Tony. Adem, is there anything else that you wanted to cover here before we get onto Tony's book?
Yeah, but I was too scared to ask because it was so beautifully already wrapped up. I was just going to add, I was just going to throw away, I love how you talked about the qualification and the budget and how to lead to all of those things, because that's why I found through all of these industries, my cataloging the market approach enable you to lean into getting those information so that you can, one, get the information from the market and validate, give that information to marketing, but build the best business case that's going to win where it in the most efficient manner. Time and time again, as I'm sure eventually you'll read more of mine and George's story. We've recently just written it all into a book, which I've been bastard for about 6 years. I know that I asked you about it 4.5 years ago, but it's probably almost there, where I started talking about how we built this process from even high quality suitings in 2001. And then I went into high pressure gym sales with Fitness First, like with some really crazy twisted stuff. And then financial advice, financial sales, FMO, all of these things, large contract acquisition. But all of the things that have stayed the same is when we validated the market first and got that information, we could build the business case to win the deal. And it was just really just circuits, as you pointed out throughout this whole thing. But I didn't want to jump in there because I thought you'd already wrapped it up beautifully, but George just prompted me. So that's exactly why I built it that way.
Wow. Hey, Adem and George, I've now done 4 books and I feel like I've got PTSD from the process of doing it. It's epically tough doing a book, isn't it? So what was your own journey in being able to get it done? 4.5 years is a long time and it's a crazy amount of work, right?
Yeah, without making the show just about this, for people that don't know my background, I wrote about all of the adversity from when I broke my back, my pelvis, my leg, my ankle, my foot, microsurgery in my hands, broke my foot again, all of these things, when I was in hospital, when my house burnt down, all of these things.
Crazy.
But we've recently intermingled that with at what employers I learned what lesson, and through the wizardry of George Coudounaris, we've now built that out into structured pillars where people will be able to see not only how that came to life, but what it got the customer and obviously the employers at each time, and how that evolved through different lessons. So yeah, we'll give you a copy to read, obviously, Tony, but it's 24 years of lessons while I was recovering from those things, and then the last 3 years where George had to put up with me.
Actually, Tony, one of the interesting challenges has been, because Adem has such an interesting story, finding that balance between like memoir and business book, because I think that Adem's personal experiences like help shape the way he thinks and like progress the narrative along. And I mean, you've written several of these at this point. You don't want the ultimate point, the ultimate meaning to get lost as well. So maybe, Tony, if you're open to it, I would love to send you a draft as well and get your take on it too. Appreciate that you're a very busy person and might not have time, maybe even just a nice ChatGPT summary or something. But that's certainly been a challenge, is blending those two.
Sure, look, I'd certainly love to have a look. Yeah, no, that's great.
Let's get on to your latest one, Tony, Sentient. For those who don't know, could you tell us like what this is all about? It's your first book, if I'm correct, when it comes to actually writing fiction.
Yeah.
Could you share a bit more about what this is all about?
So we all know that AI is changing the world very rapidly and in ways that none of us can really fully understand or grasp. So I work a lot with tier one technology companies, doing a whole lot of sales training, and I use AI, everybody's using AI. And what I found in researching AI for about 4 years, what I discovered is there's not one insider expert about AI, not one on the face of the planet, that is optimistic about how all of this is going to end. So AI is not just another revolution. It's not, we had the Industrial Revolution, then we had the Information Revolution and the Knowledge Revolution, and now maybe we've got the Intelligence Revolution. But mankind has invented something that is now recursively self-improving itself and showing all sorts of evidence of there being dangers for us. So I decided to write a fictional novel that's extremely plausible about AI safety. It's a very human story at its heart about Sarah, who is the leader of the world's preeminent AI safety institute. And she's lost everyone she loves and everything that matters. And Adem, I know for you in your life, you've had a huge amount of adversity. I have as well. I've come to learn that resilience is hugely important in success. But I've written what I think is a wild ride into a probable future that may already be here. So it's set in 2027, which is when people believe artificial general intelligence is going to arrive. So that's above human level intelligence. And AI is already much smarter than humans in many things. And the thing that's going to make it truly AGI is the ability to be able to contextualize and orchestrate other AI agents effectively. That's when there's going to be massive disruption. So right now, the opportunity for everybody is to become a little bit of a cyborg. That's what I talked about with tech-powered sales. Take the best parts of being human that AI cannot do, but blend it with using tools and tech incredibly well to drive superhuman levels of performance. And I think you'd agree, I'm seeing people do that. So every seller on the face of the planet now basically has their own business analyst and research agent with them. They've got a meeting assistant that can transcribe meetings, it can write draft emails to follow up the meeting, it can create CRM or case notes that you can put into your own systems of record. So there's so many things it can do for us now. But yeah, that was what really inspired me to write the book. And it's got President Trump in the story, all set in 2027. So it's available on Amazon. And if you love suspense, speculative or thriller fiction, I've had amazing feedback on the book.
That is awesome. I absolutely encourage everyone to go out and get yourself a copy. Check it out, Sentient on Amazon. Tony, it must have been a bit of a different process for you actually going and writing this book, creating a fictional world, but it actually seems like it might be a lot of it is grounded in reality. Was that a challenge, shifting from writing like business books to something that is at least a bit more fictional and you have to create the world and the characters around it?
Yeah, over on my shoulder beside Sentient is my first book, The Joshua Principle. And although that was about RSVP selling, it was about a strategic selling methodology. I wrote it as a true story. Now, it's not actually a true story, but it reads like a true story. And central to that story was Joshua, a rep who had a very broken relationship with his own dad, his dad was very successful in business, wanted to help him, but his son Joshua didn't want a bar of that. And his dad dad convinces his son to at least work with a mentor. So, and you get to listen into the mentorship. So selling and marketing is about telling great true stories that our potential buyers can put themselves in the story really well. So that's, I figure AI is the biggest existential threat to humanity right now. And that's going to become increasingly so. But I thought, write a great story that helps people understand what AI actually is and how it works and why we need to be concerned and what are our best options for trying to make AI safe. Yeah, so that was really the process. And writing a story is tough because every character's got to play a role and go somewhere. Yeah, it was an interesting process rather than just writing a fact-based book.
Amazing. I love it. Well, congratulations on it. We'll have to get ourselves a copy too. And again, please check it out, people. Sentient on Amazon. Tony, before we wrap things up, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you'd really love to add to the conversation?
No, just please feel free to connect with me in LinkedIn. So if you just look in LinkedIn, Tony J Hughes or Tony Hughes Sydney, you'll find me in LinkedIn. If you'd like to check out the latest book, I've got a dedicated website. It's sentientbook.com. There's a video recording of the book launch that we did, had a couple of hundred people at it a few weeks ago. And would be more than happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. And George and Adam, thanks for having me on the program. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time.